The terrorist group ISIS is losing. At the end of 2014, it claimed a territory the size of Great Britain and a population of 11 million people. But today it's lost about 60% of that, and its population is down to about 2.5 million. It's the result of fighting its enemies on all sides. To the west and north, ISIS is fighting armed rebel groups and the Russia-backed Syrian military and its allies. It's also fighting Turkish troops and US-backed Kurdish forces in the north. And to the east and south, there's the US-backed Iraqi army. It was this Iraqi army that delivered the latest blow, when they took over ISIS's biggest city, Mosul, the group's capital in Iraq. It was a symbolic loss. Mosul is where the group declared a caliphate, or Islamic territory, in 2014. This set them apart from other terrorist organizations. They weren't just a network of jihadists strung out across several countries, like al-Qaeda. They governed actual territory, which they called the Islamic State. Now with the loss of Mosul, the fall of this ISIS caliphate seems imminent. So, what happens when ISIS is gone?
So problem number one is that these fighters are going to want to go home. So in 2014, when ISIS captured a huge swath of territory in Iraq and Syria, tens of thousands of foreign fighters came from all over the world to join the caliphate. According to UN estimates, as of July 2016, there were upwards of 30,000 foreign fighters. So most of these fighters came from countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, but hundreds also came from countries like Belgium, Germany, the UK, and even a few dozen from the United States. So these fighters were drawn to ISIS for all sorts of different reasons, but a big one was that it had actual territory and was supposed to be building a caliphate based on its own extreme interpretation of Islamic law. ISIS propaganda pushed this narrative in flashy, violent videos and magazines online, encouraging people from all walks of life, not just fighters, to come and help build this glorious Islamic State. And the people who came were not just young men, they weren't just fighters, there were women, children, and even families who came as well. But now, as ISIS's territory shrinks and the state that they tried to build collapses, anyone who survives will have to find somewhere else to go. And that's a major problem, because many of these people are now indoctrinated, they're now well-connected, and they're capable of carrying out deadly terror attacks. A similar dynamic actually happened back in the 1980s in Afghanistan. So thousands of foreign fighters flocked to Afghanistan to help the Afghan Mujahideen fight the Soviet invasion. And after the Soviets left, a lot of these fighters dispersed to various different theaters of jihad, including Bosnia, Chechnya, Somalia, Sudan, and elsewhere. These fighters ended up forming a loose network of transnational jihadists, most of whom had links to Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, thanks to their time fighting in Afghanistan. And some of them actually went on to carry out attacks against the West, including attacks against the United States. So the worry now is that ISIS fighters will do something similar, but this time they might actually make it home to places like Europe and launch attacks there.
So the second problem is what to do with the US military after ISIS falls. Right now, the US is helping local forces in Iraq and Syria to defeat ISIS. There are currently around 1,000 US troops in Syria and around 6,000 US troops in Iraq. Mosul, which was ISIS's capital in Iraq, has fallen, and right now the US is helping Syrian local forces to defeat ISIS in Raqqa, its so-called capital there. So as those two cities fall, ISIS has been spreading out to rural areas. The Trump administration has two choices. Option one is to keep the US troops there, which would leave them in harm's way. Or option two is to bring them home, which increases the risk that the region breaks out into war again. Option one is a big political risk for Trump. He promised during the campaign that he would not get involved in foreign wars, that he would actually invest American money and time at jobs and resources in the United States. And so if Trump were to keep troops in the region, he would be admitting that he's going against the political philosophy he espoused during the campaign and currently during his presidency. Option two is definitely also a risk for Trump. If US troops were to leave, that opens a space for sectarian violence to break out in the region. Let's take a look, for example, at what happened in 2011. When the Obama administration took most of its troops out of the region, that gave the Shiite government in Baghdad the space to crack down on Sunni populations throughout the country. And ISIS took advantage of that. ISIS was seen as the defender against the Shiite government and was able to gain support and allowed for its rise to continue. So while it doesn't necessarily mean that if troops leave, an ISIS-type group or ISIS 2.0 itself would grow out of that absence of US troops, but that risk certainly exists.
A deadly California shooting rampage.
A lone gunman to pledge allegiance to ISIS.
Both incidents carried out by so-called lone wolves.
Problem number three is ISIS moving from a place to an idea. Up until now, ISIS had one goal: defend the territory already had in Iraq and the territory already had in Syria. The problem is it's on the verge of losing both. And when that happens, ISIS goes from being the kind of place people go to fight to being the idea that people fight for. And it's an idea that's compelling. It's an idea that its followers are willing to kill for, and that its followers are willing to die for. When it first came to power, people thought it's a group that has its own territory, it wants to control that territory, but it's not al-Qaeda. It's not a terror group that wants to carry out attacks outside of its borders, in the West. That was proven tragically wrong in October of 2015.
This is the bomb ISIS claims they used to bring down the Russian passenger plane over the Sinai Peninsula.
In their online magazine, they posted photos of the bomb that they said had been used to blow up the plane. And that was a reminder of what was about to come. A wave of ISIS attacks that have killed hundreds of people in London, in Paris, in Nice, and have inspired attacks that have killed dozens here at home, in California, and in Orlando. It's worth remembering that these are not always attacks carried out by people who are part of ISIS. In many cases, these are people who are radicalized in the countries where they lived. And that's the danger of the idea. Take what happened in San Bernardino, California, where a married couple killed 14 people. Or in Orlando, where a single shooter killed 49 people. In both cases, ISIS claimed responsibility, but in both cases, there was no connection between those people and ISIS. They got radicalized over the internet. ISIS has known that propaganda matters, and ISIS is really good at it. It has people all over the world who use English language, Arabic language, to have Facebook pages and Twitter accounts that are full of incredibly slickly produced videos. They're really compelling, and if you're someone predisposed to have that worldview, they can push you over the edge from just thinking that's an idea worth killing for, to actually killing for it. ISIS takes it so seriously that it refers to these people as media operatives, and says those media operatives are carrying out a form of martyrdom, akin to killing, to literally killing, for the cause. And at the end of the day, that's the hardest thing about ISIS. It can be beaten on the ground in Iraq and Syria. It is being beaten on the ground in Iraq and Syria. But it's going from being a place to an idea, and it is impossible to defeat an idea.